Welcome to Flattening the Curve, a podcast to disability advocates. Here, we knock down barriers one story at a time. I'm your host, John Couchy. Let us begin. I would like to welcome our guest today, Director of the Sports Education Camp for Athletes with Vision Impairments, Scott Ford. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing well, John. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
Oh, you are most certainly welcome. And I do want to give a shout out to the other director of the camp, your wife, Leanne Ford, who is a rehabilitation therapist at the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons. Now, as many of our audience members might know, or you might be interested to look back in previous episodes, in our last season of Flattening the Curve, we learned a bit about this camp from its founder, Dr. Paul Ponchilla, and we also interviewed and spoke with some former athletes and now volunteer coaches at the camp, Tyler Marin and myself. So, Scott, my first question to you is how would you describe this camp?
Sports camp is a place where athletes, parents, and the public can gain an understanding and realize that people with disability such as blindness or or a visual impairment can actually be an athlete, can understand what it is and how it feels to be an athlete. And hopefully when they leave camp, they get a bit of the feeling that, hey, this is something I can take back home and I can demonstrate to others or participate in my own school.
And that's something this camp has seen a lot throughout its history, having multiple athletes first get introduced to a sport at this camp and go on to be Paralympic athletes competing at the highest levels.
Absolutely. With sports camp, we do this through a variety of clinics and honestly, just athletes getting to know other athletes. And as John just mentioned, bringing Paralympians and other people who are participating in sports, whether you're a scholastic coach or people like you, John, who came to sports camp and haven't left. And it's just your life skills, your life experiences demonstrate how sports have affected you in a positive way through your life. And it's very empowering.
Now, do you mind painting us a picture, going into a little more depth on what does this camp look like? What goes on at this camp?
So with sports camp, we started out with junior camp, and the athletes that come to junior camp, they may have never even been away from home in their whole life. They're usually, some of them mostly start at around age 9. They come to camp and their parents bring them. Their parents are shown the dorm setting where we're at. We hold it at Western Michigan University, and we stay in typically one of the college dorms. All of our facilities are collegiate facilities. We do many of the sports at the SRC. Some of the swimming is done in the SRC swimming pool.
And
We use
SRC,
the
a student recreation center.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. And we do all our track events at the Canley track. And the track is a 1/4 mile long. And we do sprints, we do shot put, discus, kicking, throwing. So we start with the fundamentals in our clinics, as I mentioned earlier. And in these clinics, the coaches could be a Paralympian. So, for example, with goalball, we bring back people such as Tyler Marin and others who have been Paralympians. And we have other athletes that come and assist as well. And through the years, we've had Paralympians from judo and track athletes, elite swimmers, and they get to be mentors to these athletes, and they get to, outside of the sport, they get to explain and get them to understand what it is to actually be an athlete. Because being an athlete, there's a lot of things that are not explained. For example, when you got an athlete who's coming in and they've never done anything with athletics, such as whether it's judo, wrestling, or track and field, all of them need to have an understanding for what the ready position is, or what it is to prepare to get ready to burst off the start line, or take a grapple when you're in judo, or a positioning for wrestling, because we use constant contact, and our sports sometimes are adapted, sometimes they're not. It depends on the sport.
Yeah, and when at this camp, it's pretty much from sun up to sundown. Athletes, which is what we call the participants at the camp, because they might enter not feeling like they're an athlete, but we ensure by the time that they leave, they know that they are an athlete. From sun up to sundown, they're going from sport to sport, learning and participating, even competing in some cases.
That's absolutely true, John. we but the one thing with sports camp is it touches lives far beyond just these sports. We've got athletes and people who've been coming back for, well, for example, John, how long have you been returning?
Uh, that's a number that we're not going to discuss on this. 30 or 23 years.
Yeah, so
I'm too young to
23,
say I've done anything for 23 years.
that's exactly true. And but you bring back a wealth of knowledge that is not just having to do with the sport. And in doing so, how many peers have returned with you? We've got people who have been to camp as an athlete who have returned from their careers, whether it's at Google, Apple, or, you know, attended college at Western or California, or have gone on to life to work for the United Nations, or a whole variety of high impact places. And this wealth of knowledge gets to demonstrate to athletes who attend sports camp that, hey, you're only at the beginning point and you can have an exciting life with a disability, and it doesn't have to hold you back in any way whatsoever.
Well, and I'll go on a little tangent off that. For many individuals with blindness, they might be the only student in their school with blindness. I know for me, I was the first person blind I ever met. uh, and it wasn't until going to this camp and not just being around peers, but seeing those older peers, those adults, those role models, and seeing what life could be versus, unfortunately, what I was dealing with when I first lost my sight and attended camp not 6 months later. I was thinking I was riding on a dead end street, not knowing what possibilities were. And yes, having those former athletes who came back, those Paralympians, those lifelong athletes that are achieving greatness in various fields showed me that there was hope. Uh, and that's just one of the many things that individuals learn at sports camp. Uh, I think another thing that's important to know, and a big reason why we focus on athletics and sports education for individuals with blindness and low vision, is because, and Scott, if you can talk a little bit more about this, there's a lot more you learn from sports and athletics than how to jump, throw a ball, or kick. You learn some pretty vital life lessons. So it's important to know that aside from seeing these role models and learning what's possible out there and giving individuals hope, we focus on athletics and sports at this camp because you truly do learn a lot more through competing in athletics than just how to jump and kick a ball. Scott, can you attest to some of the vital life skills that are learned through sports?
Well, there's the most obvious one is the teamwork, the group camaraderie, the feeling of success when an athlete or a group of athletes works as a team to accomplish the goal of winning a game. And not to mention the competitive nature of sports likes to set people in an adversarial direction. However, learning that being an athlete requires you to look at the team perspective, but also to be charitable and also be humble when you are successful and be encouraging to the other athletes. So this all goes in. We provide awards at the end of it. And some of these awards instill these values and these important goals, like John's mentioning, so that they win them awards, but then they get to come back and they get to kind of let the other athletes see, hey, I won this award last year. Maybe you can win it. And they can provide encouragement and have team spirit and also, be respectful of others. It just, there's just so many different levels to camp that go far beyond just the sport itself.
Now, before being introduced to sports, many of these athletes come to camp and maybe they've never set a goal for themselves. Maybe they've never had that determination to self improvement, get that drive and that accountability to practice, to really work hard on something, feel that responsibility for their performance. There's so much there with the sports, but also the fact that we're staying in a college dorm. These athletes get that pseudo college experience, waking up, getting ready in a dorm, eating in a college cafeteria alongside college students. I will say our camp should get some kickbacks from Western because I'm pretty sure a lot of our athletes end up going to Western because they fall in love with the campus while they're there. But I digress there. Uh,
We
there's
do have a
so
lot of
much
athletes. Oh,
there's so much that gets learned at this camp and benefits that far outweigh just the athletic achievements.
that is true. And as you pointed out, we do have a lot of athletes who come back and attend Western, or, for that matter, they realize that, wow, this college student who is doing their practicum or doing a volunteer stint at sports camp this year, they they're going to college and they're blind. I can do that too, because many of our athletes, being their first time away from home in a big bad college, it's very intimidating to them. But once they're there for half a day or a day, the 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 butterflies in their tummy or their apprehensions about being away from home or the homesickness, it doesn't necessarily go away, but it becomes a lot more manageable to them, and they grow as a person. I can't tell you how many parents have come back to me the next year and said, "What did you do to my child?" When they came home, they did not want me doing stuff for them. they refused to let me help them. And it's like, I felt bad. And it's like, no, that you just gave me a pat on the back and the most encouragement for keeping camp going, because it's so exciting to hear stories like that about parents seeing the growth that 3 to 5 days can do for an athlete.
And that's the most mind-blowing thing to me is we see this massive change in 3 to 5 days. And what essentially is happening at camp is we're taking a group of individuals who have been told they can't, they won't be able to. Those feelings tend to get internalized. And in a matter of 3 to 5 days, depending on if they're at the junior or senior camp, their eyes get opened and they realize that I can't is really I can.
And that is the first thing they're told when they come to camp is, you may not enjoy every sport we do here. However, we want you and need you to participate in every sport so that you can determine on your own after you've experienced it if it's the kind of sport for you. And kind of going back to our schedule type of thing, when an athlete first comes to sports camp, in junior camp, we do a lot of fundamentals and we start from square one. We use a program that Paul developed using carpet squares, and we teach them that, hey, when you're using the carpet square as orientation for doing a variety of the moves necessary for doing sports, such as the ready position I mentioned earlier, as well as kicking and throwing, you can use that carpet square so that you can start the precursor body movements and mechanics so that you get a base understanding for that. For example, when a sighted athlete goes to Little League or they go to gym class, the coach or the PE teacher is standing up front and they're kicking the ball. And that's all that's said. But there's a whole bunch of steps that are required in doing that. And by having the carpet square and somebody facilitating that, along with all of our volunteers helping out and making sure that the body mechanics are correct, this gives them a more physical understanding as to how it's all done. It's broken down into simple steps. And they can internalize this over the week because we use the same language as we go through sports camp, even through senior camp. So junior camp is primarily for the fundamentals, and it's not quite as competitive as senior camp. Senior camp is set up so that we come across as a more scholastic, a more high school uh, type of event where there's more competitions. And what the first years that come to that camp are is they have to go through every single program or every single sport. And then the second year athletes, when they return, they do some of the beginning sports, but they have a more latitude on picking the sports that they want to participate in, whether that's a lot more goal ball or it's more track and field. Some of them are into judo or wrestling, but then that lets them kind of hone in on the sport that they really enjoy. But while all that's going on, they are having to travel through the university on foot. We typically walk to many of the locations. So they're learning. We're not in a mobility camp. That's the first thing that needs to be said. So we do human guide as well as we do encourage cane skills. And parents, when they bring their athlete, we encourage them to get the athlete used to their dorm room by orientating them. If parents don't orientate the athlete so well, then we do have our other volunteers who do come up and show them where the emergency exits are, make sure that they know where the bathroom and make sure that their stuff is put away properly.
we're not getting them dressed in the morning. We're not doing their ADLs. They are fully responsible for getting themselves up and ready. And that's part of that accountability that they learn throughout camp.
That's true. We don't. And we've had some trashed rooms.
I know you've had me clean them. Uh, but
But
you
we
called me.
encourage using the closets, using the cabinets so that they can keep organized, because it's amazing how many clothes can get strewn around a room in a day and a half to
What
three
a
days.
teenager can do to a room in a couple days. I tell you what. Uh, Now, you called me out on how many years I've been at camp. 23 years now, two of them as an athlete, and I believe this would make it 20 years as staff uh, this year. How did you and Leanne get involved in camp?
So
And how long has that been?
yeah. So in 1999, Leanne came to sports camp as a graduate assistant, not a graduate assistant, as a grad student. She was doing a study that Paul was conducting on sports camp at the time. So they had uh, a federal grant they were working on getting, and they were doing studies on, well, we still take the metrics for that study, but it hasn't been published in the same way since. But anyway, she was working on that study, and then she got hooked on it and became friends with Paul and Sue Ponchilla, who were the directors and the founders at the time. And then the next year she drugged me back, and that was in 2000. So it's been about 25 for me, 26 for Leanne.
It, Now, we mentioned what Leanne does for a living, working at the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons. Blindness is kind of a key aspect of her professional life, but you have a more personal connection to blindness, if you don't mind sharing that with the audience.
Yeah, when I was 26, I was in the Navy, and all of a sudden I couldn't see at night. And then from at night, I went golfing and I couldn't see the ball when it was teed off. I've been a lifelong athlete all my life. High school, I played football, ran track. When I got out of the high school, I continued to play golf and water ski and do a bunch of sports like that. Uh, but as you age or, get out of school, you don't really do as much with sports. You get more wrapped up in life. And, but when I was 26, I eventually went to the point where the Navy said, you're too blind to stay in. So I basically got medically retired from the military, came home, and I was pretty much going to college, working at a business that some friends of I were running, and she got me into sports camp, and frankly, it's completely changed my direction in life and turned sports into something that was just a passing enjoyment on my spare time, to the point where I actively sought out different sports. I did judo at the training center for a while. I became a brown belt in judo and realized that that sport was a little more than I wanted to continue. And as I was getting older, so I got into sailing, and I've been a competitive sailor. Well, I was doing that from 2014 to 2019, at which time I haven't been sailing nearly as much, but I have been competitively sailing since. And that's a
And I
sport that
know you've
continues.
been searching for the funding to get sailing at camp, but we don't necessarily have the space for that yet.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's a very expensive sport to
yep.
conduct at sports camp.
So, hint, hint, nudge, nudge to any donors out there if you want to see some blind sailing.
Heck
uh,
yeah.
but you guys have been there for 25, 26 years, respectfully.
Yeah.
And after Paul and Sue stepped down in about 2008, 2009, you and Leanne took over as the camp directors.
Yes.
And I guess my question is like, what are those things about camp that really fill your cup? What keeps you coming back?
Well, it's twofold. One, it's what we see when an athlete returns to camp. And the other aspect is the uh, athletes who return to sports camp. Sports camp, when Paul was running it, he was really doing. I mean, sports were just starting to gear up in the Paralympic world, um, and even today, Michigan SEC Sports Camp, it has touted to have the most Paralympic created or helped to be the ground uh, foundation for athletes who become Paralympians. And we are very, very excited that that is happened and is continuing to happen. But also, we have so many athletes who have returned as both coaches and volunteers for sports camp. It it's overwhelmingly exciting and encouraging to see the alumni come back and they put their hearts and souls into this camp. And that in part is a very big part for us. So, and yeah, we absolutely love camp and we want to see it go on for the next 38 years. What, 38 years you said it was? Or
I think,
36 this year,
yeah,
right?
36th anniversary, I think this year, so 37.
Yeah,
It's always confusing between anniversaries and how many years old something is. Uh,
right.
but yes, it's really, I can't agree more. It's when people come back and you see the impact that camp has had. When you have a 11-year-old boy come to camp one year afraid to get hit by a ball, afraid to fall down on a mat, and then the next year, you have a completely different 12-year-old boy come back who apparently has the same name and social security number and all that. But the kid standing in front of you is not the same kid who walked in the door last year, as they are talking about being on their middle school wrestling team, about how they're talking about trying out for the football team, and they are just excited to have opportunities.
And they're 11 inches taller.
That part I could do without. I'm getting sick of looking up to all these kids. They've surpassed me in that area for sure. Uh,
That is so true.
okay, yes, everybody knows I'm short. Uh, now, you've mentioned these amazing athletes. We've talked about them throughout. When Paul started this camp, it was really about the issue of the school for the blind closing and athletes being put into a mainstream school setting. And in a lot of those cases, physical education instructors, gym teachers, sport coaches in the mainstream did not understand how to coach or work with individuals with blindness, often excusing them from gym, having them sit on the sidelines, being the scorekeeper, or in some cases, the goalpost. Uh, is this an issue that still persists?
Unfortunately, it is. The the problem today is as much as anything, PE in school is not as relevant. They don't feel it's as relevant as, computer classes. Technology is probably an amazing leveler for people with disabilities, but at the same time, it's very easy for somebody to just get sucked into technology, and then all of a sudden, physical fitness is set to the sidelines. And the PE teachers, they're becoming more aware that people with disabilities can do athletics, but we still struggle with the PE teacher who says that, oh, you can't play basketball because you can't see the net. Well, we've got a whole bunch of ways that both we can make that ball different, and we can make that goal, make it so that a person with a blindness or a disability can see it or hear it or know it's there. There's so many different tools at our disposal that we can give to a PE teacher so that they can get a better understanding, so you can make it accessible. And we've had athletes who come to sports camp and they go home and they do demonstrations for their PE teachers, as well as if you go to uh, the website, if you Google USABA, they have a whole pile of adaptive tools for making a sport accessible. And it's a wonderful place to get information. And I'd like to encourage everyone to go there. And basically, it's not being blind is not a, a reason that you can't do sports. And
Absolutely. And we want to provide and encourage these opportunities. So bear with me here. I have a two-part question for you.
okay,
When we're looking at the participants for camp, who can sign up and how do they sign up?
okay. We do two camps each year. As I mentioned earlier, we do a junior camp. Junior camp athletes are from age 9 through 13, or I mean, sorry, 9 through 12. And this year, that camp is going to be May 11th through the 13th. And then the 14th through the 17th of May is going to be senior camp. And that's for athletes who are age 13 to 18. And in some cases, because Michigan goes to the age of 26, you can remain in school. There are situations where it's appropriate that we do allow athletes up until that age, if you're in high school, to attend sports camp.
Okay. And they can sign up and when we talk about an individual with blindness, it's anybody who meets legal blindness status.
Yes, actually, we do allow athletes. If you have a condition where, eventually you're going to become legally blind, or if your vision isn't the greatest, we encourage you to go ahead and sign up anyway, and then we'll give you a call and we'll help make a determination if sports camp is appropriate. We don't want to discourage anyone from signing up that has a visual impairment, or who have, can't see that great.
Yep.
Because hey, we want to be inclusive. We try to not exclude folks.
Yep. So even if you don't reach the level of legal blindness yet or at ever, but if vision is the barrier that you have to athletics, you are welcome.
Right. And one of the other things to keep in mind is sports camp is designed as a more competitive sports direction. And if your uh, limitations, say you have a variety of disabilities and you need a whole bunch of help, sports camp may not necessarily be what you want. We do a lot of, we have, I mean, as John mentioned earlier, you're going from like 7 a.m. until 10:30 at night on the move. This isn't just sitting in places. So if this kind of activity and you need a whole bunch of supports, we don't want to exclude you, but we want you to be aware that this may not be your cup of tea.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we don't want anybody coming to camp and sitting on the sidelines because it's not medically safe for them to participate because of whatever other issues they might be facing. There's
Absolutely.
not much that we can do in those circumstances because we are doing some contact sports. There is some heavy exertion. Um, Full disclaimer, we're gonna work these athletes into becoming athletes. Um, and
Precisely.
and that is something to keep in mind when registering. Uh, but speaking of registering, how do they register for camp?
You go to the MBA website,
Which is miblindsports.org.
and you click on the sports camp link. And if you are happening to be a person who either has an athlete, you click on the athlete link, or if you're someone who'd like to volunteer, you can click on the volunteer link as well.
Okay.
And something else that needs to be mentioned at this point is parents are not allowed to stay at sports camp. We are a camp where you drop your athlete off, and this is where the magic happens. When mom and dad go home, as nervous as many of the athletes are, because this is the first time they've ever allowed their child to leave home, you got to leave them at junior camp for a couple days. And at senior camp, it's about 3 to 4 days, 5 days. And we get to do our magic and then return your athlete after they are transformed from just a child into an athlete. And that's another thing. We do not call them campers, they're athletes at sports camp, because that is a very important distinction in my mind.
Oh, as we discussed in this podcast many times, language is a powerful tool. Uh,
It is.
Now, another thing I do think is important to mention is now in the registration, it may show that there is a fee for camp. However, we want to ensure that financial barriers are never a concern for any individual attending camp. And correct me if I'm wrong, there are two agencies that can help with the funding of individuals attending camp.
Yes, absolutely. The first one is the Michigan Bureau of, uh, wait, they
Bureau of
changed it.
Services for Blind Persons. I know they
Yes,
changed their name a handful of years ago, and many of us are still used to the
BSVP.
old
Yeah,
name.
right. And if you're I think it's a full VR athlete or a VR client of theirs, then they will provide the funding and I believe it's transportation to camp if needed. And if all else fails, and many of our athletes also get support from their local Lions Club to come to camp. And we also have the parent organization of sports camp is Michigan Blind Athletic Association, MBAA. They also provide scholarships for camp so that athletes we don't want any barriers and prevent any athletes from attending. So they have available scholarships on a request basis. It can be anywhere from you know 25% all the way to 100%, depending on what your need is. You just need to ask. And
Yep.
if you have any questions about any type of financial aspects for sports camp, including transportation, because a lot that's been an issue for years, is a lot of our athletes have struggles getting to camp. And we have ways to overcome that barrier. And the website to send is located at, or I mean, the email associated that you can send that to is michigansec@gmail.com. And if you got any questions whatsoever, it's also on the website, on the registration page. And we do have a phone number. So feel free to contact us with any questions.
Wonderful. So, athletes, if you're hearing this, even if you don't recognize yourself as an athlete yet, we will recognize you as an athlete and we will get you there. Please don't hesitate to register. Parents, uh, we can't endorse this camp enough. It is a fantastic opportunity. And any listener out there, if you know of somebody, please share this information with them. Uh, but additionally, you mentioned before volunteers. This
Yes.
camp takes a village to run. Uh, and I think we have an opportunity to do kind of a call to action for potential volunteers. So, who are you looking for volunteers, Scott?
We are always looking for coaches who have experience in their field. In other words, in their sport. Um, we, it's always a ongoing struggle to make sure we have high caliber coaches, but more even than that, we volunteers who like to drive, volunteers who are interested in helping make sure athletes get from event to event. We have group leaders who are so critical for the everyday operation to make sure the athletes are ready and uh, basically have all their gear and are ready for their events. So it's pretty important, and we always can use more volunteers. That's for sure.
So that volunteer registration, there are many types of roles that a volunteer can fill, and you can find that volunteer registration also at miblindsports.org. And I will warn you though, if you sign up to be a volunteer, you might sign up thinking this might be something fun to do this year, and then you might look back and go, okay, I've spent 23 years at this camp. That time flies, but I tell you what, it is sometimes a lot of work, but it is one of the most fulfilling weeks you will ever experience.
I can't agree more.
And
I've been there for 25 years. You've been there 23 and I've been there 25. Wow, that's
I
kind of
know
neat.
we're getting old, man. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and that's where we need maybe some of that fresh blood coming in. Uh,
Absolutely.
but don't be intimidated about volunteering for the whole camp. You can volunteer for a day, you can volunteer for two, you can volunteer for half a day. We want to share this experience with as many people as possible.
Yep. And also just a note, um, we do hold the camp at Western, and the facilities are number one. And obviously it's a university, so we're we're playing on college level equipment. And when you got that level, it also costs quite a bit of money. I think last year the budget was in excess of 52,000. And so it does take a bit of money to fund the camp. And
So,
we do have funders, but we're always looking for more funding sources. And
absolutely. And the directors and your volunteers really look to stretch every dollar as far as it can go. So, any donation, no matter the size, truly goes a long way and will impact people's lives for years to come.
and with that said, there are no paid positions at sports camp. The only position that gets a stipend, if you will, is our grad assistant that comes from the university. And by the time actually, by the time camp actually begins, they've already put in their 40 hours that they're getting their stipend for. So they're literally a volunteer as well. So
Hmm.
all of us are volunteers, and all the money that is donated to sports camp basically goes to the operation of the camp itself.
Yep. So, as we wrap up Sports Education Camp, celebrating its 36th year in operation this year. It will be going May 11th through the 13th for junior camp, May 14th through the 17th for senior camp. Registration is still open, but will be closing by mid-April, so do get on that as soon as possible. Scott, I can't thank you enough. I know I'm going to be finishing up my registration here in just a second to sign my soul over to the camp once again. Looking forward to it. Before we send you off, is there anything else you'd like to add or leave our audience with?
I just want to express my appreciation for having me on the show and appreciate the fact that you're doing this, John, because highlighting and demonstrating people that have disabilities and how they their lives can be every bit as fulfilling as somebody that's not that doesn't have a disability. I appreciate that greatly. And it's important for people to understand, hey, we're people just like you.
And with that, we're just going to continue to knock down barriers. Thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you in the future. Sports Education Camp is something very near and dear to my heart. I know I will be there come this May, and I hope you all are there as well. I do want to say tune in next time, as we're going to be continuing to talk about sports a bit, as we'll be sitting down with an utterly amazing woman, Jen Van Sciver, over at Special Olympics Michigan. Thank you all, and have yourselves a fantastic rest of your day. Recording. Once again, this has been John Couchy with Flattening the Curb, a podcast brought to you by Disability Advocates. For more information on our organization, engage with us on social media and visit our website at dakc.us. Like and subscribe, hit that notification bell to be alerted when our next episode drops. And remember, you can't have inclusion without accessibility. So let's build a more inclusive world, one story at a time.